Want to learn how to paint like a pro? Welcome to my two-part series of the free tutorial of painting cherry blossoms in watercolor. I'm a former graphic designer turned watercolor artist based in Japan. My name is Anna Ishizuka, and I've always had a deep appreciation for botany and nature, and my passion is painting flowers and plants primarily using watercolor. In this tutorial, I'll teach you how to realistically paint one of Japan's most beloved flowers, the Sakura cherry blossom. Their delicate, semi-transparent petals make them perfect for watercolor. I'll be using the wet-on-dry technique, a classic method for layering watercolor to achieve clarity, crispness, and greater control over your paint. I will walk you through step by step from start to finish, so I hope for you to join me in this journey. Let's start painting! We finished the masking, so let's figure out where we want to paint first by looking at a reference photo. You'll find the lightest areas that are hit directly by the sun and the medium to dark areas that are in the shade. We'll begin with the medium values. Let's get our paints out and start adding color. Test out your colors first. Here I am mainly testing with carmine and a hint of brilliant pink. This is a wet-on-dry technique, so I'll start with a preliminary wash. I will be painting petal by petal. Make sure the painted area is completely dry when adding more color, which is opposite to a wet-on-wet technique. Be careful not to fidget with your painted area like I did, embarrassingly enough to say, with that first petal. As you can see, when it is getting dry, blooms started to form. That's because the area was still damp and I added more paint or water. I will be fixing that by smoothing the hard edges with a damp brush. While painting, keep in mind those areas that have the sun's highlights. I drew in major shapes but not all in the outline.
I'm adding a dab of carmine to the edge of the petals while it's still damp. Keep in mind that this part has highlights, so watch out for those shapes. This is known as reserving. And this means to reserve the areas by painting around them. I'm adding layers of carmine here. Make sure that your paper is completely dry. I am lightly adding in the veins and shadows here. I'm softening up the hard edges with a clean, damp brush. I'm adding in darker veins with a liner brush. I'll get carmine and define the edges of the petal. I will sometimes use my liner brush like a pencil and pencil the strokes in. Here I am strengthening the veins and shadows and adding quinacridone violet to the mix. I like to switch between brushes with the Winsor & Newton and Interlawn brushes. We are slowly but surely building up the values and details. Squint to make sure you have the correct values, so we can somewhat finalize this first petal, where we can use it to judge the rest of the petals in the next video. Now that we've finished the first petal and we got in our desired values and details, let's go on to the rest. I'm using my liner brush with carmine to paint in the veins to guide me and give me more definition. I'm starting from the middle of the petal and I'm pulling the strokes inward. Look out for those splits. You want to follow along the shape of the petal for it to look natural. I am painting them freehand without any pencil marks underneath, so make careful observations of where the veins are and if they split. For this petal, I am mainly pulling those strokes outward from the central area, but also inward for some. It really depends on the angle of your hand and painting. I'm marking in from the center first. I'm painting in with my liner brush here. I'll often switch liner brushes from size 1 to size 1/0. I have my mixture of carmine, permanent alizarin crimson, and quinacridone violet. As you can see here, I'm changing the way I'm holding the size 0 liner brush. I'm also putting it at an angle so that I can get more width to it instead of a fine line. On this last petal, I'm strengthening the shadows. I'm again using the brush at an angle to get those shadows. At this point, I'm using the liner brush like a pen or pencil and filling in those detailed, darkened areas. After the veins are added, I'll add some medium washes with my round brush to build up the values. Some areas I find that are cooler, I will add quinacridone violet. While the paper is still damp, I will carefully add some darker tones to the bottom edge of the petal. I soften the hard edges with a clean brush. Let's go on to the next petal. I'll add color on the bottom and I'll blend in to the top with a clean damp brush right away to achieve a gradual transition. You want to do this right away before those hard edges form. I'm adding in some more layers for the veins while it's still a bit damp so that it gives a diffused look. This technique is optional, but if you want to work on damp paper, make sure you don't have much water on your brush so that the pigment doesn't spread out or give you blooms. It can be a bit tricky as your paper can't be too wet as well. I'm adding in the deep shadows where those 5 star-like shaped petals are overlapping. I'm darkening the veins here. I sometimes will touch the surface to see how dry it is. I like the concept of how this Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 2 brush can be so versatile. It can give you those really sharp lines, and it could also give you thickness like a round brush. So you can basically get away with just using this one brush. Let's go on to the final stage of the first petal. I'm testing out the strength on carmine on test paper, as you can see here. I'm darkening the overlapped petals. This shows you that these Sakura petals are semi-transparent, which is perfect for watercolor. Squint and see the tones compared to the reference photo. Keep in mind that when watercolor dries up, it's not as saturated when wet. So keep building and adding layers until you get the desired tone. Let's speed this up a bit. When you have mistakes, just dab with your paper towel. As I've strengthened the inner overlap petals and central area, I can judge the values and compare to the petals and veins. Because I do a wet on dry technique, I use a clean wet brush to soften the edges. I'm using a liner brush here to get into those details of the mask areas of the pistils and stamens because the central area is darker. I'll do a light glaze or wash with quinacridone violet here as it's in a cool shadow. I'm intensifying the values here by squinting. Check back and forth with the reference photo and your canvas, and squint to see which areas need darkening. I am using my kneaded eraser here to pull out those dark pencil marks. I'm doing a wet on wet technique in some areas here so that I can get a soft transition. Because I'm painting in the lightest shades of the value scale, and that's the actual value I want, there won't be a second or third wash. So I'm painting in the lightest shades of the value scale, with carmine and a hint of brilliant pink. For the wet on wet, I dampen the paper and I'll drop in color to the areas, so that it can spread and create a soft transition. I check with my finger to see if the areas are still damp. If so, I'll go on to the other petals or shapes that are not neighbored or next to each other. After the soft washes are dried, I will add in the veins and shadows. If you make mistakes, just dab with a tissue or paper towel. To get the more orangey tones, I use quinacridone scarlet or scarlet lake. You can mix scarlet lake with a hint of brilliant pink to get a salmon-y pink color. I will be going back to the wet on dry technique for these petals. Make sure you plan out ahead to reserve those areas with highlights. I'm adding in the shadows with the stamens here. I'll mostly be using a mixture of Scarlet Lake with other colors. I'm using Scarlet Lake plus Carmine and Permanent Alizarin Crimson to get rich, warm, orangey colors. I'm using Scarlet Lake plus Brilliant Pink to get those vibrant salmon colors. Here I'm using a size 0 liner brush and getting into those fine details of the veins and stamens. Get your yellow Gamboge Nova ready, as we will start using it with Quinacridone Violet to get those dark brown inner areas. We will be working on the top left bloom, and that is the lightest blossom on our canvas. There is a lot of direct sunlight, so we want to be careful in choosing the lightest values on our value chart. This is probably my favorite blossom or area to paint, as the light directly hits and gives off these sharp, dynamic, interesting shapes of highlights and shadows. I have a light mix here of Quinacridone Violet and a hint of Brilliant Pink. We want those tones to be on the cooler side, so let's add a light purple shade. Notice that I am directly adding in the veins first, with no wash on this blossom. I am using the Interlawn size 1/0 liner brush, which has shorter hairs than the size 0 brush, and I feel that it gives me more control and stability over my lines. This is where we will use Payne's Gray, which is more of a stormy, dark blue. I will be mixing in a very watered down Payne's Gray with quinacridone violet. Make sure you test it out on your paper. Here I am mixing Payne's Gray with Brilliant Pink. As I want to mix the red tones with Payne's Gray, I am using Scarlet Lake, Carmine, and Payne's Gray, all very watered down to get that purple-pink mauve color. I will be interchanging with the round brush, and this is when I will be adding in the washes. Because there is just so much sunlight, it's easier to get the values of the veins in first, then add in the wash of the lightest possible value later, because it's close to white. Keep in mind that when the value is this light, it's hard to lift as there's not much pigment. Here I am adding in the veins first. Then we'll add a wash next, and then gradually intensify the areas and build up. Next, we want to strengthen in the area of the blossom, so I will be adding in some brown tones and some violet. Let's go back to the other blossom where it still looks flat. And let's add in more details and contrast. I'm intensifying the petals with Scarlet Lake to get that warmer orange hue. Let's add some permanent alizarin crimson to darken in the central areas. We'll be working on the bottom left and top right blossom in this stage. The rest of this video will be in high-speed motion, so if you ever get stuck, remember the steps made in the previous stages of the mid to light valued blossoms. The paint colors aren't that crucial here as long as the values and contrasts are painted correctly. But if ever in doubt, carmine is the predominantly used color. The lighter, warmer tones that are hit by the sun are made from values of Scarlet Lake. The darker, cooler tones in the shade are made from a mixture of quinacridone violet. In these steps, I will be adding the washes first, petal by petal. When the wash is dried, I'll add in the veins and shadows. To darken the petal, I'll add layers of washes after each dried section. I'll further add in the details and texture to build up and intensify the area. This is optional, but use a hairdryer if you ever prefer working faster. Keep adding layers to build up to get the desired tones and values. Make sure your area is completely dry to get the crisp details. Soften the edges with a clean damp brush to get the blended gradation. When you want to remove pigment from an area, do a lifting technique where you get a clean damp brush and lift out the colors. Constantly go back and forth with your reference photo and observe those details. Try to squint often to get the correct values. This might seem very repetitive, but I hope that you can enjoy the process and get a hang of it. This method is a way to ensure you to get the correct values, in addition to having complete control over your painting for a realistic look. Let's move on to the darker areas in the next video. Welcome back. How are y'all doing so far? Now that we've painted the medium to lighter areas, let's get into the medium to dark areas where the shadowed petals and buds are. This stage of the video took many hours to complete, so I am compressing it all with high-speed motion. Building layers in watercolor to achieve the depth and strength of a color is important. As demonstrated in the previous stages of the mid-ranges, I do a light wash first. I then add in the veins and shadows. I layer on more washes or glazes to get the depth I need, and I will repeat the process. I will often squint to compare the focus to the other petals and blossoms. Once everything is dried, I will add crisp details with the liner brush. In this stage, I'll start using quinacridone scarlet, or also called cherry red, for the areas that have a more vibrant orange-pink tone, a color that is close to a coral red. The shadowed areas tend to have a cool tone, so I like to use permanent alizarin crimson mixed with quinacridone violet. If that color is too vibrant, I would add gamboge nova to the mix to get a warm brownish tone. If you want a vibrant coral red or cherry red that pops out, use quinacridone scarlet. Add in some carmine, permanent alizarin crimson, or quinacridone violet to darken it. I use a paper viewfinder, which is basically a tiny hole cut into white paper. This helps assess the color of the specific spot due to many distractions it's surrounded by. Your eyes will sometimes get confused with all the colors and shades, and it helps you to focus on that certain area. It is especially helpful when you are working with colors in shadowed areas like this. Just an FYI, if you're viewing the reference photo on a mobile device or an iPad, make sure your settings for display and brightness are on the same mode whether you're working on it day or night. To get the vibrant red bud, I used a mixture of quinacridone scarlet, carmine, permanent alizarin crimson, and quinacridone violet for the darkest areas. In this stage, we will be mixing more varieties of colors and hues to make it look more realistic. In the end, my palette is going to look like a muddy mess, but that's totally okay. We want those brownish, muddy red colors and murky purple tones in there. Throughout the stage, we've used all colors mentioned except for sap green, which will be used later for the stems. For some of the buds, a hint of Gamboge Nova is needed. If you think you've added too much paint or a different color, just blot with a paper towel. Let's add in the details and fine-tune the overall piece. Let's step back and look at the work as a whole. Since we have been painting it by section, whether it's petal by petal or blossom by blossom, we need to look at it in its entirety and try to unify it all together. By adding the dark buds behind the blossom, it gives great contrast and helps the blooms in front to pop. I want more contrast, so let's quickly take a look at the process before and after. This is what we want to achieve. Notice that I am going back to the very first petal that we painted in the middle. When compared to surrounding blossoms, you can judge its value even more. As watercolor appears lighter when the surface is dry, I'll be going back to define certain areas. As the darker areas are complete, I will go back into the lighter ranges of blossoms to strengthen areas. I'll be adding in a green pistil here, made up of Payne's Gray and Gamboge Nova. We'll be painting in the dark stamens here, and I am adding in an initial wash of Scarlet Lake, then building up with other darker tones, eventually adding a mixture of Quinacridone Violet. We are almost there. Let's move on to the next stage. Let's get to the fun part. It's time to remove the mask areas using a clean rubber tool. This area is detailed and delicate, so carefully remove it. I'll be using washi tape to remove the rubber bits, but that's optional. Let's work on the pistil. Find the stigma and style located in the middle and paint that in with a mixture of Gamboge Nova and a hint of Payne's Gray to get that yellow-green tone. Now let's work on the anthers, which is the yellow part that contains pollen. I'm using Gamboge Nova straight from the tube. Because there are so many of them and it might get confusing, I will work closely with my reference photo and spot the anthers and align them like stars. Yes, like constellations when they make a pattern in the sky. This doesn't have to be perfect, just make sure it is attached to a filament later on. As you can see in the reference, even the anthers have shadows formed underneath or next to it, so to add in the dark shadowed spots, I'll use an orange or brown tone. I'll mix in either carmine or a quinacridone violet to Gamboge Nova on my palette. None of the filaments are pure white, unless the light is strongly hit, but even so, it will have some color reflected from the pink petals and inner areas. Now let's focus on the negative space. Separate the areas where the filaments are close together and make definition of each filament. Because the central part of the flower is a deep color, it will have a gradient going outward. If your masked lines are too thick and look unnatural, paint in the negative space of the petals to make it look thinner. If you get lost, just make sure the filaments curve naturally from the center. Repeat the process here. Add in the brown shadows for the anthers. Also strengthen the yellow-green stigma. Fill in the central area and reflected colors on the filaments. Define the filaments by coloring in the negative space. Sometimes it helps to define the filaments first, so work on the negative space. Observe your reference photo closely, and again if you get lost, make sure the anther is connected to a filament, which is curved naturally from the inner area, with gradation applied later on. Let's work on the unmasked part of the stamen and pistils, which are in dark shadows. The lines and dots are darker than the petal, so let's paint them in. Continue the process for each blossom. Play around with a mixture of colors to get the brown tones that you desire. In areas with more shade, the base colors of the anthers will be an orange or brown. If your masked areas are a white blob, clean up by painting the negative space and making those filaments thinner and sharp. In this blossom, I've realized that my values were too dark, so I'm wetting the surface and blotting it with paper towel to slightly lift up those values. This last blossom on the bottom right has both lighter and darker filaments to fill, coloring in the white masked filaments and defining them, and painting in the dark filaments with no masked area. Let's move on to the next stage. We are almost there. We've finished the main part. We'll now go on to the stems and branch. But you may opt to omit the branch if you'd like that flowery wreath look. However, we've come so far and we want it to look even more realistic, so I hope you can follow me in these last steps of the journey. Let's fill in those vibrant light green stems with sap green straight out of the tube. It's a certain color that you cannot achieve with Payne's Gray and Gamboge Nova. However, for the shadows, we will be using the green mixture from Payne's Gray and Gamboge Nova, in addition to some yellow-brown tones in the mix. Find those yellow greens between the petals. Although they may be tiny, it will make your painting come alive. I'm adding in a brown wash made from Quinacridone Violet, Gamboge Nova, and Payne's Gray. The more yellow you mix in with the violet, the more orange you will get. And to get the cooler brown tones, add more Payne's Gray. Watch out for those highlighted areas where the light is hitting when adding the washes. I'll then add some dark lines and shadows of the crevices to help define the structure a bit more. Observe where the lines are parallel to the branch or going around the cylindrical shape to form a curve. Keep building up with different colors of brown, whether that's warm or cool.
Congratulations! We've come to an end. Thank you for being so patient in following along in this extensive cherry blossom tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the process. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram at ArtsyAnna, where I post most of my work. I love to see your projects, so please tag me, and I'll be happy to answer them in the comment sections or on Instagram. I hope that you've been inspired and that you'll continue your journey with watercolor with me. Thanks again. Check out the prequel for a deeper understanding of the process and materials used. Don't forget, I've included a list of materials, a drawing outline, and a reference photo for you.